I'll give you 2 more minutes. I'll give you 2 more minutes so you can play around with it. Okay, before I tell you what the answer is, what's hard about this?
I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know if it's too, like, I don't know how the shape is formed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, all of that. I don't know what a shape is.
Okay. No worries whatsoever. Wait, Lauren, are you recording? Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
So I'm actually just gonna show you how to do it because I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I'll tell you that this shape used to be really hard to make until Figma released a new feature last year that makes this like super, 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 super easy. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I do it. So I'm gonna copy this one here because no one is working on this one, and I'll put it here. And I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit transparent so that we can see that this is my image. Okay, so how you do this is all you have to do is draw 2 circles. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw 1 circle first. I think this is about right. Yeah, it's probably around 200 by 200. And I'm going to go ahead and eyedropper. I'm gonna make the gray one first. And so you'll see that here's my circle. And look at this little, like, there's like this little circle here that says arc. And so this is called the arc tool. And the arc tool is like the world's most magical tool ever. So you can experiment with this a little bit later, but when you drag it, you can create like these really awesome, like pie chart-esque things. But the other thing that you can do is you can actually, oops, sorry. You can actually, like, if you look up here, there are these settings that let you change the start, the sweep, and the ratio of the circle. And so the first one I'm gonna adjust is the sweep because, no, sorry, the first one I'm gonna adjust is the ratio. So the ratio is what sets how big the ring is. And so just looking at this, I think my ring is about this large. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make my ring this large. It's not perfect. I don't remember what my original size is, but if you look here, you can just adjust this and it'll create a ring for you. And so this is called ratio. I don't know why it's called ratio. It's probably something math related. That's why I got confused. But ratio is the one that you want to adjust if you want to make a ring. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this ellipse over. And so you'll notice that here at the bottom, this is the gray ring. I'm going to label this gray ring, and then the top is going to be the green ring. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my eyedropper, I or Control C on Mac, on PC, I don't remember, but you can use your question mark keyboard shortcuts to figure out what it is. I think I should work. And I'll get the green color of the green over here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the sweep so that it is smaller. So I don't know what angle this is, but we'll go ahead and just like experiment. And so you'll see that now it's kind of just in the wrong place, right? It's like starting to form there, but it's not quite right. And so I'm going to go ahead and adjust my settings a little bit. I'm going to cheat just because I wrote down the numbers earlier, but this is the setting that I had selected for the ring on top. Now, to get those rounded corners, all you have to do is change the rounded corner radius here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just type in 40. And so if I hide the puzzle layer in the back, you'll see that I've created the ring shape just by using Figma's pre-made features. So I didn't have to do any shape manipulation. All I did was like draw a circle and change the settings. And then I got this really fancy like ring thing that's really trendy right now. And then for the text, that's just Montserrat. And so this is like the one time I'll let you use Montserrat, but anyway, Montserrat. And it's about like, it's probably a little bit bigger than that. And so I'd probably make it a little bit bigger. And ta-da, I've created this. And so this is called the Arc tool. Really, really cool. Like you can play around with it a lot. It's super awesome. You can make a lot of cool graphs. You can like go like this for ages. It's super, super fun. Like you can play around with this. Like you can make a lot of really cool shapes with this, and it's all like built in for you, so you don't have to do anything. I prefer typing in the numbers here just because it's more exact that way. And so I can like control like what exact angle it is, or like what exact soup it is. And so it's very, very easy to manipulate. Just like mess around with these, and I think you'll have a good time when you're making those like cool little circle graphs. Any questions about this tool? Awesome. I really like this tool. It's really cool. I also learned about it recently, and so no worries if you didn't know about this before. I'll give you all a second to try it out and let me know if you have any questions about how it works, because it's kind of a tool that you just have to play around with and mess around with it until you get it just right.
Where did you learn about it? Like where do you learn?
One day I drew a circle, and then I saw the circle in the circle, and I was like, what does this do? And then I clicked it, and I was like, oh, cool. So that's like how I learned about it. I think Figma also tweeted about it last year or something, but I just like missed it. A lot of times when you're just like playing around with the tool is when you learn new things about the tool. And so highly encourage that you all just play around with different tools. The pen tool is really hard to use, so maybe not the pen tool, but any other tool, just like play around with it and see what happens.
That was going to be my next question, was like, what about the pen tool?
So you're like, yeah, the pen tool, like I would wait until, so I'm going to do a class on it soon, but not next week, just because I think it's a fun tool to learn, but it's not super useful unless you want to draw blobs or if you want to do illustration. And so I don't know if we're there yet, so I'll let you know when we can do that. Usually in the past when I've taught pen tool, I have everyone trace a coloring book page with the pen tool because that's the easiest way to learn how to use the pen tool. And so I'll try to do something like that in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something in the future. Awesome. I see people playing around. Does this make sense, or do people need me to show you how to do it again? I'm going to go ahead and hide these ones because no one is using them. Maybe I'll just like go like this. So dramatic. Oh, Ruth is using that one. If you're using one of them, put your name on it so that I don't like delete it. Can I get a thumbs up if this made sense? Or you could also say thumbs down if it was confusing. Awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Please play around with this later. It's really fun. You can even put like rings and rings and like create like pie charts and stuff. Super fun. Don't overuse it though. I know this is like super trendy right now, and so don't overuse it. You don't need a graph for everything, but if you're like making some sort of fitness app, you'll probably need something like this. Okay, awesome. The next thing I want to mention is the shortcuts quiz. And so the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because my favorite thing to do is to challenge myself to not use any clicking when I'm designing something. And so I really highly encourage all of you to start memorizing shortcuts, especially the ones up here. Like, you shouldn't ever have to click on frame or on rectangle, line, or ellipse. Those four specifically, and text, those are the most common shortcuts, and they're very easy to remember. Like, rectangle is R, L is line, and ellipse is like basically a circle. So it's an O. And then frame is F. And so super easy to remember, text is T. So try not to click on this. I really like to design when I like don't have anything around. And so a lot of times you can draw a lot of stuff without even like clicking on anything. Like, you should be able to just draw a wireframe by just like drawing like without looking at your Chrome at all. It should be pretty easy to do that. And so just like try to challenge yourself to like not look at your Chrome, just because it just gets super in the way, and clicking takes a lot longer than just like clicking on shortcuts does. The other thing is, if you look in the help and resources button on the bottom right of Figma, you'll see keyboard shortcuts. And so there's even a shortcut for the keyboard shortcuts. So you should be able to see this no matter if you're on Windows or Mac. And you should be able to just quickly jump through these and get a sense of what all the shortcuts are. Not all of these are useful, but most of them are pretty useful. And so I would definitely memorize all of these. And then also based on the quiz has all the ones that I find the most important. And so memorize those first if you haven't memorized those yet. I think those are the most useful. The other thing I want to mention is, I showed this during another class today, but I'm going to show this really quick right now, is the bring to front and bring to back. These will save you a lot of time if you just like memorize what the shortcuts are for these, even though they're like kind of weird shortcuts. I'm going to use really bizarre shapes just because I need to show this example. So like right now there's like a bunch of shapes overlapped on top of each other. And if I want to reorganize them, a lot of times people take a really long time to reorganize these shapes. So for example, if I wanted this to go straight all the way to the back, some people, they like go here and then they click this and they drag it down to the bottom. Other people like control click and then or right click and then they say send it back. But I highly recommend that you all start memorizing the shortcuts. So like if you look at this, I can move things around so much more quickly because I'm just like I'm not really like clicking on anything. I'm just using my shortcuts to move things around. And the fastest way to learn how to do this is to just screenshot this, like right click on a shape and screenshot this, or control click and screenshot this and just memorize this. This is really crucial. If you can just memorize this, it will save you so much time and energy from clicking. So just memorize this. This will go a long way. Another cool thing you can do in Figma is if I am on this shape, ellipse 20, these are terrible names here. I'll just rename them. Oops. These aren't great names either, but whatever. So say I'm on shape 1 and I want to go to shape 2. If I hit tab, I can go, I'm not touching my mouse or my trackpad. If I just hit tab, I can jump between these, and if I click shift tab, I can jump up. So it's a really cool way of just navigating within layers without clicking on anything with your trackpad or mouse. Super easy. I would highly recommend all of you start practicing these shortcuts just because they'll save you a lot of time. Awesome. Okay. I have another rant about text boxes, and it's only because last week I forgot to mention this, and so I want to talk a little bit about text box management. And so I feel like I always want to talk about text box management, but first thing I want to talk about is like these three options here. So there's a line top, a line middle, and a line bottom. So when do you use all of these? So I'm going to give an example for each one. So this first one, imagine you're making these cards that aren't actually in cards, and you put an image in these cards. What should we do today? Let's do space. Yes, we're on the same page. Okay, space. That photo's kind of boring. Okay, whatever. I got the same photo. Okay. So now we have the moon, and I'm gonna go ahead and put some text underneath. So this is a moon. Oh my God, I'm now in Montserrat mode. Save me. Okay. So this is a moon. And what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna make this wrap into 2 lines just for the sake of this demo. So let's see. This is a moon. I'm a moon. I'm so uncreative, I'm sorry. Horoscopes are cool. Okay, so pretend this is like the heading that we have attached to this image. And you'll notice that right now, this is aligned to top. And the reason why this is important is because if I were to make this into a component, actually I'll make it into the component and show you. So this is a component, this is a card in quotation marks. So this is a card. And the reason why this is important is if I were to copy this again, and this is like the template one, if I start typing here, I'm gonna make this a different image just for the sake of this. Oh no, why does it look like that? Okay, why does it only wanna give me pictures of the moon?
They should literally just rename space to moon.
Okay, this is gonna be ocean. Okay, so like this, so the cool thing about this is now when I type this as an ocean, my text is still aligned to the top of the image. So this wouldn't work this way if, when I come back here, if this was center aligned, so aligned to middle, and I started typing this is an ocean, then my layouts are off. So now this is just center aligned in this area instead of being flush to the top of the page. If I were to change this to be aligned to bottom, it would be even worse. It'd be like, this is an ocean. And then it would be, the text would like align to the bottom of the text box here. And so it's very crucial that in scenarios like this, you select this top option. So you'll notice that like, even though I made a mistake here, now when I go back and select the top option, my text shifts up. And this is really great, especially for cards, because a lot of times with cards and headings, especially if you're designing like a news app or something with varied heading links, there'll be like, you'll have both 1-line headings and 2-line headings. And so usually when you have 1-line and 2-line headings, you're going to want to pick this option because then things will always be aligned to the very top instead of being like this. I think by default, usually Figma does this one, and so you should be okay for this scenario because by default, they do align to top because that makes sense. The next thing is vertically centered. So when in the world do you use vertically centered? The first example I could think of is slide design. And you'll probably also need to use this in like heading areas, but I'm just gonna show you for slide design for now. And so for a slide, when you're typing some text, like this is a heading, this is a title slide. I really need to come up with better copy. I'll do that next week. I feel like my copy's so bad. Okay, so this is a title slide. And then maybe my text is like, maybe my text is like centered on this page. It doesn't necessarily have to be centered, but it could be. And so I'm gonna add some grid to this just to show you where the lines are. Column, I'm just gonna do 1 column. I'm just gonna like condense it a little bit. Okay. So this is a title slide, and I'm gonna increase the text box. Oh, I just did a big no-no. Did you notice that? So this is what I was yelling at you last week about. So you notice I didn't center the text, and so then when I made the text box bigger, the text was like, ooh, I'm gonna go on this side. So always remember to change this. Okay, so if I were to do this, and I had a title slide that looked like this, and then I wanted another title slide that has more text, I'm gonna copy this under. So this is my second title slide. You'll notice that it grows downward, right? And we don't want that. So this looks really awkward because then what happens is, I've definitely done this like a million times before. I'm like, oh, like I forgot to change the text box out, so I'm just gonna move it up so it's centered. Well, you don't even have to do that. So how you could save yourself from doing that is if you just press this button here that says align middle. And now what happens is when I type in, this is my second title slide, it like grows this way. So it's growing from the center. And so that way, especially when you're making, if you made this into like a component or something, this is really helpful because then no matter what text you put in, it'll grow in the direction you want it to grow. And so these options are really helpful, especially for when you are designing like, and honestly, when you're designing like anything that needs to be scaled, making sure you have these correct is super, super important, along with having these correct. Okay, now for bottom alignment. So bottom alignment is kind of interesting because you probably won't use it that often, and I couldn't really think of a very good use case for it off the top of my head. So if any of you have any ideas, please let me know, but I'll just show you what it looks like when you do bottom alignment. So for example, maybe for some reason, along with these images, I'm going to have like some sort of like caption or like maybe like a heading or something that's like attached to the top of the image. So this is a moon. Okay, so this is a moon. And then maybe, I'll just type the same thing I did over there. So maybe for some reason you want to put the headings on top of the image. I don't usually recommend this just because it just depends on what you're doing. Sometimes people will want to do this, and so I'll just show you anyway. And so maybe the heading is on top of the image, and what happens is if I have this set like this, I'll make this a component again.
Instagram has it where they have like the account like name at the top of images that get posted.
That's true. In that scenario, I might do vertically center because the name never hits 2 lines. But for that scenario, it doesn't really matter as much.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. Okay, so here, and then again, if I were to retype this, hello, you'll notice that like the text is like awkwardly apart from this. And so best way to fix that, actually I don't even have to do this. Best way to fix that is to choose this option. And so the text is stuck to the top part of the image. And so all really important things to explore. I would make sure that you play around with those, especially when you're making text boxes. I think they'll go a long way. Also, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to shout them out or put them in Slack. Okay, also next week, I'm going to talk about constraints a little bit more. I don't know how familiar everyone is with constraints. So constraints are like what happens when you resize, like what happens when you resize things and what happens to the objects inside. So do people know how to use these?
Not really.
Okay, cool. We'll talk about that next week. Let me write that down. I just randomly remembered. Great.
What the constraints?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with them. I feel like I use them the most for my prototypes and making sure that things appear on the prototype the way they're supposed to. Because sometimes if you don't have constraint sets, you'll end up with a bottom navigation bar at like the top of your screen, and yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah, constraints are kind of confusing, so we'll go over it too, just in case. Okay, color. So I know that I kind of breezed through color last week, and so I'm gonna spend more time on it this week, just with the same graphic and just with some general pointers. So last week I showed you all this graphic where I was like covering things up and I was like, don't use this because this is too neon, and then like, don't use these things down here. And so I just want to reiterate some of this just so that it's all clear. And so the thing I see people do with too washed out is this. So I'm going to use this example for everything. So this is my template example. I'm just going to use this for everything. Oops. So what I see is this. I'm just going to pull like from one of my color palettes. So it's like, okay, great. Like I made these purple and it kind of looks like Instagram or Messenger. But then the big flaw I see is this. So people love tinting the background color for some reason. And I actually feel like when you tint the background color, it makes the app feel a lot less professional because it's my question is, why don't you just use like a neutral color? And so I would recommend avoiding tinting the background color in general if you're making any sort of website or product. Just use like a light gray or white. And hopefully all of you saw my little rant about the color tan, because just avoid the color tan at all costs, please. But just try to use like a plain color for the background, because it just becomes really distracting when you put like a pastel, like very light color in the background. Again, I want to reiterate that this is mostly for like UI and like product stuff. It's not necessarily for like your portfolio. So for your portfolio, a lot of things will break the rules. And so don't worry if you have a pastel background in your portfolio, it's probably fine. So don't take that to heart there. This is mostly for like products, UI, and like all things related to an app. Some of you might be like, my purple isn't that strong, and it probably looks like this. Also, just don't, it just doesn't make a big difference. It's like, I feel like when you have like a lightly tinted background, it just makes everything feel a lot more crowded. And it's really hard to find that perfect tint, because then oftentimes it just looks like murky gray. So just like try to avoid doing that. If you look at this, oops. If you look at this, you know, oops, I guess I was using like, oh, this was great before and then I changed it. I was just using pure white and then a gray for the bubbles. And that's like what Instagram and Facebook do for all their messaging apps. Something else that's cool that just got released is selection colors. Selection colors is really, really cool, especially if you were too lazy to make color styles, which I always do. So the cool thing about selection colors is, for example, there's like a pink thing here that I forgot to change. And so I'm gonna go ahead, and so I have this entire frame selected. And this is funny because I wrote a note to talk about selection colors. Okay, so copy this, I would copy this color, so 77ODFF, and then I would paste it here. So this is my pink. And when I hit enter, that color changes. So the cool thing now is, just with the frame selected, instead of me going in and like selecting, this is like what I always do, going in and selecting every single instance of the color, you can actually just change it in one place. So if I click on this purple and I'm like, like I don't like this purple anymore, like what will it look like? And so you can kind of just like play around with what the color looks like just by changing it in one place. So super, super easy to play around with and super, super cool. I would highly recommend that all of you play around with it a little bit more. It's really awesome and will save you a lot of time, especially if you're just experimenting with colors. Again, like I highly recommend when you're experimenting with colors to like copy this over and over again, so that, I just almost did it again because I forgot this feature existed. But you can click on this and then I can like go in and like, okay, what if it looks like this ugly green? I would never select this color, but then you can put all your 3 options next to each other and see which one works the best. This just got released like 2 weeks ago, and so don't worry if you haven't played around with it yet. They made a really big deal out of it at the Figma conference, and everyone was like, ooh, and it was like really funny because all the designers got really excited because I guess no one saves their fill styles or color styles. So highly recommend playing around with that. It's a really easy way to adjust colors really, really quickly. For example, if I wanted to make this all like a light gray instead, totally possible. But now I have like a lot of other mistakes too. So it's just really easy to play around with. And so I highly, highly recommend playing around with that.
I noticed it, but I had no idea why it kept popping up.
It's kind of weird. Like, yeah, it just like has a weird name, like selection colors. I guess it kind of makes sense. It's like the colors of the objects you have selected, but I still find it a little bit confusing. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. One thing I forgot to mention last week is like color family type things. And so one thing that I think people should avoid doing is picking like, so if for some reason you need like a red in your product to signify danger and you have a product color, I'm just gonna type this up here actually. So if I'm creating a color palette and there's like danger, like if I have a danger color and then I have a main product color, oops, product color, danger color, main product color, and then maybe I have like a success color. This is something I see a lot of people do. Okay. So I'll see this. So maybe the product color is like this blue, and then the danger color is like this red, and then the success color is like this green. And you'll notice that they don't actually look like a family. So this one is a lot brighter, this one is darker, and this one is a lot lighter. And so make sure to select colors that are in the same family with each other. And so what I mean by that is, for example, if I pick this row called Milky, oops, you notice that now, I'm gonna just, is it too confusing if I put both of them next to each other? I'll just hide this for now. Oops. So you'll notice that these three colors are more similar to each other because they're all a little bit, they're from like the same color spectrum, where they're all like a little bit milky. I'm sorry, that's like a terrible description, but it just has, it's basically like added white. So if I was to like keep pursuing this color palette, what I would do is I'd probably just like copy it a few times and iterate on it a few times. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So color takes a lot of iteration too. It's just like all a lot of, it's all a lot of like, sorry, I need to drink water. Give me 1 second. So it's all a lot of iteration too. So color does not just like come out of thin air. It's just a lot of playing around with it and seeing what works best. And so what I might do is like try a version where the blue is a little bit darker this way. I might try the red a little bit darker too. I might try the green, keep the green the same. I might try experimenting with a different shade of blue and then try experimenting with a different shade of red. I think there's like a lot of things you can do with color that are just like playing around with it. And I highly recommend that all of you do that instead of, I feel like color generators are okay, but they tend to generate like colors that aren't in the same like family. So they don't feel like they use the same tints of white and gray. And so try to experiment with your color choices a little bit more and don't rely on generators as much. I think a lot of it is just going to be like looking and like comparing and putting these colors into your designs. And so I know that also, I just realized Lisa gave a really good point in Zoom. Just look in Figma if you can't see the color differences, because Zoom is kind of like, the colors are a little bit off. But if you look in Figma, I promise you they all look very different from each other. And so you'll notice that these three are pretty different from each other. And if I was to actually put these into a product that had these colors, they would have very different types of energy. And so really try to experiment with your color choices a lot. It'll make a really big difference. The biggest thing is to remember to pick in the same family. So so the families I've created here are bold, milky, and too bright. And so if I just make sure to select colors that are in the same family, it'll really go a long ways. Don't do, where did I put it? I hit it right. Where is it? Oh, well, don't do the thing that I did earlier. I don't know where, oh, I covered with a rectangle. I'm really dumb. Okay, so don't do the thing I did earlier where like I have this really bright like red color and this like really dark success color and this like medium product color. This doesn't feel like a family. And so make sure that when you're playing around with color that each color has equal parts of like white plus gray.
Question. If you
Yeah.
don't trust your eye to just like see whether or not colors are in the same family, how do you like check that?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So, I mean, a good question. So I need to think about this a little bit more. I've been like thinking about this for like 2 weeks on end because I can't decide how I do it. So what I would recommend is there's a few different ways. So let's like investigate together. So I'm actually going to screenshot this and see if this gives us any insight because I'm kind of curious. I think there's something to like where it lands in this color spectrum. So you'll notice one of the things you can do is see how close the circles are when you like put them next to each other. So I don't think they need to be exactly on top of each other. So these two are kind of like very close to each other and this one's a little bit lower. But I think like there is a general like area where it's like where it's more, they tend to match more than other areas. So it's probably like, let me just draw like what the radius is like. This is not an exact science. I'm just messing around and seeing what happens. I guess that's, rectangle's not big enough. Maybe it's like something like along, oops. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do this instead. This is an experiment. We could also learn absolutely nothing out of this, and this is also like one data point. I'm just overlapping these on top of each other. So it's kind of interesting because they're kind of like generally close to each other in the same general area. Whereas if I were to take these three, this is so sketchy. I hope this actually, we actually learned something from this. Okay, ta-da. Okay, so if I were to take these three and I were to overlap on top of them, on top of each other, oh, they're still kind of close to each other, but they're like a little bit, I think they're a little bit further. So all three of them are pretty far apart. So I'm not sure if this has any like, this actually means anything, but that might be something to look into, because I think honestly, generally, if you find colors that are in the general vicinity in the color picker, they tend to match better with each other. And so that's something to try out. Another thing you can do, another tip I've seen on the internet that I don't know if it's valid or not, is if you convert things to grayscale and see how close they are to close they are to each other. And so how you would do that, I've showed you all this a few times, but you can just add a black like rectangle over the squares and change the color layer to be color and do it for both. See, I don't feel like this actually does anything, but some people say that if you like change something to grayscale, you'd be able to tell like what the difference is, but I like literally don't see that much difference. And so it might be that my overlaying skills don't really work here, but that's also something else to look into. Like if you change something to grayscale, if that works for you, please let me know. I'm still trying to investigate the best way to figure this out, and so I'll get back to you on that. I think a lot of it is just like staring at it very deeply. I know that's like the worst answer, but staring at it very deeply. And then also another thing you can try is, I'm gonna try this really quick and see if it works. Another thing you can try is if you put this in presentation mode and flip through these colors really quickly, you'll notice that the green is a little bit more bright. I think this is like completely impossible to see on Zoom, but if you just kind of go like this, it's like an eye test. It's honestly just like an eye test. If you're like flipping between the red and the green, you notice that the green is like a little bit more bright. And so I'd probably have to adjust the green a little bit to be even more matchy. For all of you, I do recommend just like sticking to one color. It's a lot easier. Just because if you find one really great color, it'll make your products just really shine. And to find a great color, I think it's mostly just avoiding these two categories, because these two categories are like half of the color spectrum anyway. And so then you'll mostly be working in like one small area. I'll just show you the small area really quick again. I think this general area, like this general area, like there's like this weird, it's like, I think it's kind of between like the bright and the like murky red. It's like right here. There's like a really small area for your colors that work pretty well. And I honestly feel like if you just like lived in this area, it's like fine. Same, blue is a little bit more forgiving. Like you can go a little bit more extreme with blues, but there's generally like a triangle of like colors that works pretty well. And this is honestly just based on my experience, not based on any sort of science or anything. But I think if you like sway too much to like this area, you don't need to go there. It's like very like unnecessary. So there's like a little triangle of like area here that tends to work pretty well. Okay. The other thing I want to mention is to avoid default colors. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you what the default colors would look like on this. I hope it doesn't look good because I'm scared it's going to ruin my demo. Let's see.
Let's use yellow.
Just use yellow, yeah.
Or green.
these are the default colors on Google Slides or like Google Docs. Default colors are almost never good. They're always like kind of, there's something weird about them where they just are either like these ones are really murky. This one is also really murky. So there's like the colors that appear by default on almost any platform are almost always going to be like not great colors. Green is honestly the hardest color to use well. Yellow is a beautiful accent color and it can be really cute, but green, like I think a few of you have used green before. Green is really hard because it's almost never accessible. Like there's a big green spectrum here, but like half of greens look like this, and then the other half of greens look like this, like vomit green, and then the other portion of greens look like this like deep forest green. And I know there's some use cases for like deep forest green, but then it's really hard to find like a bright, fun green that works in a lot of scenarios. And so my advice is just to avoid green unless you're using an illustration. If you're using an illustration, or like icons, you can use like more like cute shades of green that are like a little brighter. But honestly, green is like absolutely the worst color to pick. And I had to do this in a previous job, and I spent like days on end staring at greens. And so I just know that green is like the worst color. Green is a little bit easier if you try to add a little bit more blue to it. So if you just like slide this over a little bit more closer to the blue area, it's a little bit easier to find a nice shade of green. If you're like in this like yellow green zone, it just gets like really murky. It's like this area is just like ooh. So just like avoid this area. I think it's a little bit murky. Same with like teal. Teal's a little hard too. There's only a few spots of teal that work really well that don't look eye searing. And so teal takes a really long time to get right. And so if you're considering using teal, also you literally have like a very small radius here that you can mess around in. If you go too far this way, it looks really murky. Same down here, it's like very like, ooh. So just like, I would just stay like here if you're like using teal. But yeah, so avoid these default colors. They're almost like never good. Also, I don't really know how they selected them. Like this area is like neon, and I only use these like ironically to like highlight things. So like I think neon is a really great color if you want to like highlight something. And so by highlight, I mean like this. So like this pink is really great if I'm like using it to be like, oh, like, hey everyone, like look here. And so that's a good valid use of neon. I use this a lot when I'm like highlighting my designs or if I want you to look at something. And so that's a valid use of neon, but otherwise neon is basically a highlighter. So use it as a highlighter. Don't use it as like your main color. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to show you really quick a little gradient trick because I know how much everyone wants these gradients. Okay. So one thing I've been seeing really recently that's really trendy is putting gradients in like messages. And there's only one right way to do this, in my opinion. So this is the not right way to do it. So the not right, I've already created a gradient, but the not right way to do it is to apply a gradient to every bubble like this. So this feels super dated. It feels like 10 years ago, kind of. And this is not actually what's trending right now. What's trending right now is a gradient that goes throughout all the bubbles. So how do you do that? Well, last week, when we learned how to create that shape, we merged two shapes together. And so the easiest way to do that is if I select all these bubbles, and in a good world, I would have not named these rectangle 49, but imagine they're called bubble. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna press this button here, union selection. And you'll notice that now, if I look in my layers panel, it says union. And when I open it, I'm gonna rename these bubble 1. Actually, that's bubble 3, bubble 2, bubble 1. Okay, so these are my bubbles. So you notice bubble 1, 2, 3. And so now these three are all connected to each other, whereas before these were really separated from each other. And so now when I press on bubbles, and if I add my color style to it, this like light gradient, you'll notice that it's a very subtle gradient, but it lives across all the bubbles. And so if you open up Instagram and like look at like their messaging, right now they're doing this where they have a very long gradient that travels throughout all your messages. And it's because they don't just put like one gradient per bubble, they put one gradient for all your messages. And so if you really, 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 truly want to experiment with gradient, try to make your gradient as least noticeable as possible, because the main thing about gradients that's really like that makes it feel like you're just experimenting and you're just starting out with design is if you just put gradients on like single items. So like putting gradients on buttons or putting gradients on like little icons, that's not as common as like people trying to put gradients kind of more ethereally in the background of the design. Okay. It looks like we're like almost out of time, so I probably won't have time to talk about serifs today, but we'll talk about serifs next week. So I'll just open it up to Q&A. No questions today? Awesome. Well, it was really great seeing all of you. And hopefully I will see you on Friday for the next Visual Design Club. And hopefully I won't get sick again. Okay, bye.